In the last chapter, we explored the origins of football, how it began in ancient civilizations. We saw the soldiers of China kicking a leather ball in Kuju, the Greeks and Romans battling in Episcaros and Harpastum, and even the sacred ball games of the Mayans and Aztecs. But history is never still. Civilizations rise and civilizations fall. When the Roman Empire collapsed in the 5th century AD, much of Europe entered the Middle Ages, a world of knights, castles, feudal villages, and church bells. And with this change, football itself transformed. It left the disciplined Roman fields and entered the muddy streets of Europe. The emperors were gone. The stadiums were silent. But the ball was still rolling. This is the story of football in the medieval era.
And trust me, it was rough.
After the fall of Rome, Harpastum disappeared, but the idea of a communal ball game didn't. Across medieval Europe, especially in England, France, and Italy, villages developed their own versions. These early games weren't played in arenas. They were played in fields, churchyards, and even in the streets of towns. The ball was usually made of an inflated pig's bladder, tied at the end, sometimes covered in leather. It was light enough to kick, but tough enough to survive the chaos. And chaos is the right word. Medieval football had no set rules. The number of players, dozens, sometimes hundreds. The goals, they could be a church door, a town gate, a riverbank, or even just a tree on the horizon. To score, your team had to get the ball to that target, no matter the distance, no matter the obstacles. And unlike today, you could use almost anything. Your feet, your hands, your elbows, even brute force. Tackling was allowed, pushing was expected, and fights were guaranteed. For villagers, football was not just a game, it was a festival, a celebration, and sometimes even a ritual of community rivalry. It was loud, it was messy, and it was loved. By the 12th and 13th centuries, football had spread widely across England and parts of France. But it was anything but safe. The sheer size of the matches turned them into small riots. Streets became battlefields. Shops and homes were damaged. People were injured, sometimes even killed. Chroniclers of the time often described it as a devilish pastime. One English monk wrote in 1175 that young men, after dinner, would play at ball in the fields. The tumult is great. The legs are bruised and broken bones are common. This wasn't just sport, it was mayhem. The church often condemned it as violent and sinful. Nobles complained that peasants were wasting time, and the authorities worried it was impossible to control.
Yet despite all this, the people refused to stop. Football was alive, and nothing, neither bruises nor bishops nor kings, could kill it.
In the 14th century, football became such a nuisance that the kings of England tried to ban it outright. The first recorded ban came in 1314, when King Edward II declared football illegal in London. He called it a noisy distraction that kept young men from practicing archery, a skill vital for England's military. But the bans didn't stop there. In 1349, King Edward III repeated the ban. In 1389, Richard II banned football and other games, again in favor of archery. In 1401, Henry IV reinforced the ban, and in 1477, Edward IV did the same. For nearly 2 centuries, kings and councils issued law after law against football. Why? Because football was seen as dangerous, disorderly, and unproductive. But every ban proved one thing: Football was so popular, so irresistible, that no amount of royal authority could stop it. People played anyway, in fields, in villages, in secret, and in public. Football had become part of medieval life, and not even kings could take it away. One of the most famous traditions of medieval football was Shrovetide football, played on Shrove Tuesday, the day before Lent. Shrovetide football was not a simple game. It was an event. An entire town would turn into a football field. The ball, often large and leather-bound, was thrown into the crowd, and from then on, chaos ruled. The goals could be miles apart, sometimes at opposite ends of the town. Matches could last for hours, and there were almost no rules. The ball could be kicked, carried, or thrown. Rivers, fields, and streets were all fair play. Tackling, shoving, and wrestling were not just allowed, they were expected. Imagine hundreds of villagers, shopkeepers, farmers, and even nobles all charging after one ball. And here's the amazing part. Some towns in England still keep this tradition alive today. In Ashbourne, Derbyshire, Shrovetide football is still played every year, a living link to the Middle Ages. The tradition shows us something important. Football was never just a pastime. It was about community, celebration, and identity. When villagers played Shrovetide football, they weren't just chasing a ball. They were strengthening bonds, expressing rivalry, and honoring centuries-old customs. It was football at its wildest, and also at its most human. As football continued to thrive in Northern Europe, a more refined version began to emerge in Italy. In the city of Florence, during the 16th century, a game called Calcio Fiorentino was developed. Calcio was different from the chaotic folk football of England. It was organized. Teams were carefully chosen. The field was rectangular and marked. Rules were written down. Players wore uniforms. Referees enforced order. But don't be fooled. It was still rough. Calcio mixed kicking with grappling and wrestling. Matches could be violent, but they were also ceremonial, often played during festivals and watched by nobles.
It represented an important step forward. For the first time in Europe, football was moving from a chaotic village brawl to a structured sport with rules.
It was a glimpse of the modern game to come. By the end of the Middle Ages, football had proven itself unstoppable. Despite bans, despite chaos, it remained deeply loved by ordinary people. In England, folk football kept spreading through villages, festivals, and holidays. Every town had its own version, with slightly different rules. In Italy, Calcio showed how football could be tamed and organized. And across Europe, ball games continued to evolve, shaping cultures and traditions. Football was no longer just a medieval pastime. It was becoming a European obsession. The stage was set.
The medieval period had carried football through centuries of chaos and community, preparing it for its next great transformation.
The birth of the modern game. So, what was football in the medieval era? It was chaotic, violent, and unpredictable. It was banned, condemned, and feared. But above all, it was loved. From village squares to Shrovetide festivals, from pigs' bladders to leather balls, football in the Middle Ages showed us one thing. People simply couldn't resist the joy of chasing a ball. And that joy kept football alive until it evolved into the organized sport that would soon take over the world. This was football in the medieval era, a bridge between the ancient games and the modern sport we celebrate today.